Hey everybody, welcome back to Elfbait. This is Eli, and we're getting down to day 18 of the Dungeons & Dragons 30-day challenge. So this one is favorite planar being or creature. I'm going to go away from type here. I mean, I already talked about on favorite monster overall, the Gith Yankee. I really love the Gith, and so the Gith are certainly near and dear to my heart. But because I've talked about them so much, I want to talk about another one that is really a favorite of mine. It's not one I've had a chance to use too often, at least as an encounter. As a DM, I did use one as an NPC. It was quite a fun NPC to run. But we're talking about Modrons. Modrons are these weird geometric creatures from the plains, and they are critters of absolute law. They are all, like I mentioned, geometric. They're all spheres, cubes, pyramids, and then they get more convoluted as they go up the hierarchy. It's basically like your dice. The more sides there are to a Modron, the more important he is in their culture, until they actually get up to their high uppity-ups, who are starting to actually become quite complex, looking like humanoids, things like that. And so it, they really end up being kind of a curious little group of clockworks. As a force, I mean, as an army, I mean, if I was to pull out my book here, and just, I hate having books on screen, but we're gonna delve in here and get some hard data. So if I'm looking in the book and I pull up Modrons, they range from challenge rating 1/8, down at the monodron, the little spheroids. They go up through 1/4, 1/2 to 1 to 2. So I mean, they are never overly powerful at all throughout the range of their abilities. And they have things like javelins and daggers, and they disintegrate when they die, and but they are really not a huge opponent in their own right. Where they become tough is in groups. And they become really powerful in hordes, and that's kind of how they're presented in the various settings where they're used. They're part of this massive conglomerate, this sort of giant collective machine. But the cool thing about Modrons is they still, while being mechanical, they succeed at being mechanical in ways that I think a lot of newer Magitech fails. They are completely fantastic in their presentation. They're, there's not a lot, there's no glowy bits on them, there's no vents, there's no steam tech. They're just little shapes with clockwork limbs and appendages, and they just seem very whimsical. And some of the earliest renditions of them came out of the pen of Tony DiTerlizzi, who is just one of my absolute favorite fantasy artists, and a worthy contemporary to the likes of Brian Froud, as far as like coming up with solid, fanciful, but very grounded at the same time, just whimsical creatures. And so his approach, his presentation of the Modrons, even though they weren't the first interpretations. The first Modrons go back to the Monster Manual too, and they were in the same, black and white pen and ink style that we know and love from the early days of AD&D. But DiTerlizzi took these and he just breathed life into them, and ever since then I've just been captured by them. They're quirky. They're odd little critters. If you run into them in the plains, they're not going to be much of a threat unless you run into 100 or so of them. But also the low power levels, and the fact that they are thinking creatures and have this quirkiness to them makes them excellent for creating NPCs that you want to have some sort of otherworldly characteristic that's not an angel or a demon or a fae. The one that I used was encountered in the Underdark. He was actually exploring. He was a modern explorer. He had broken from type. He was sort of an outcast for his people because he wasn't doing his job as part of the machine, but he felt that they needed to learn, his people needed to get out and experience stuff to better understand the multiverse. So the Modrons are really cool little creatures, and certainly they stand out in my mind as one of my favorite Planar beings. Again, I've talked about the Gith, specifically Githyanki. Absolutely love them and all of their 80s metal album cover appeal. Skeletal looking death warriors with silver swords riding fire-breathing red dragons out of the astral plane where their city sits on the carcass of their dead god. I mean, they're metal. But Modrons, they speak to another side of me. They're not the same kind of gonzo fantasy that the Githyanki are, but they are. They're another facet of that. The Githyanki represent that kind of, like I said, very metal kind of, kind of a thing. Whereas the Modrons they're that goofy, fanciful, I don't know, like acid trippy kind of critter that you could easily see, being run into in the Yellow Submarine animated movie. It's just they're that kind of critter. I can see them also coming out of something like an old Ralph Bakshi movie or something like that. Just like heavily lined with that really fluid animation, with just making all sorts of clicks and whirs. There's something kind of Oz about them too, and that kind of speaks to me in that regard. But yeah, Modrons. They're these spherical, cubical, pyramidal. I'm sure, and the cool thing is because they have that geometry, I guess as a DM, you can call upon those math classes that you may or may not have liked, those geometry classes, and start spinning your own Modrons, just coming up with new shapes and sizes. Part of me has to wonder if somebody just looked at their dice one time and decided that they were going to make monsters out of them. Because we have a cube, we have a pyramid, and I believe we actually, if you look at the full range of Modrons from the Planescape setting, I think we start getting into more advanced polyhedrons. You start ending up with 8-sided things and 10-sided or 12-sided. And if they didn't, why the hell isn't there that? Why is there not a 20-sided Modron running around out there, with all this stuff? Why is not the Modron Wizard a 20-sided die, and he's badass. But yeah, look into them if you've never checked them out. They're in the new in the new monster manual, in the core monster manual, which really I was surprised to find them there. Again, they were originally in Monster Manual 2. They became a thing in Planescape, and I think one of the reasons that they finally made it through to why they're in the core rulebook for 5th edition is because 5th edition seems to have baked into it more of a concept of extra planar activity. You have tieflings as a core race, which are, inexorably plane touched. We've already had several campaign arcs, which I have to imagine were pre-planned while they were developing. At least the inklings of those planned while they were developing the core system. The Feywild and the Shadowfell and all of that, those factor in a lot more now too, in at least lore-wise. So having more planar creatures in the core books that weren't just devils, just Azamar, that weren't just weren't the standard that we've come to know. Genies are extraplanar creatures that, and actually, you know what? This video is going to get a little longer. I got so preoccupied with freaking Modrons. I didn't even mention genies. But you know what? I'm going to stop there because episode 19, its favorite elemental, plant, or construct. And while genies are extraplanar creatures, they're also elementals. So you got a preview. This is the first of these 30-day challenges that's going to give you a preview. I'm going to talk about genies next time. Genies are one of my favorite. But anyways, going to call it quits here. This is the end of the episode, keeping these short. They're just real quick blurbs to get in and get me talking and get me sharing with you, so you can kind of find out where I come from, a delve into my experience as a player, as a DM, and talking to you about ideas, sharing ideas, maybe talking about that thing you really never took seriously. Maybe you've never even you looked at the Modrons and you're like, these guys are weird, I don't want to use them. Anyways, it's Eli from Elfbait. Comment below, talk it up. I want to hear what you have to say. Like, share, and subscribe, and get out in game. That's the most important part. You're done watching me here, go play a game.